in an unprecedented geopolitical hole because of that decision, and China did not back down. Well, I guess around and find out. What's happening right now in Iran really reminds me of what happened in Tiananmen Square 1989 in China, the country which I was born in. The unprecedented uprisings, massive protests, and thousands of reported deaths on the streets. Iran right now is experiencing the largest uprisings in decades, and some even say this might be it. This might be the end of the Iranian government. As someone who was born and raised in another authoritarian regime, I keep seeing these patterns of people protesting, and the regime comes down hard, controls the narrative, manipulates public opinion, both within and outside their borders. Today, I want to talk about those patterns, and more importantly, how the West keep falling for that narrative over and over again. If you're new here, my name is Lu. I talk about how authoritarian regimes work from my lived experience, and today we're going to talk about Iran in comparison to China.
I want to show you something that's going to help you understand the gravity of the moment that we're in right now. Do you know that this is not the first time protests this large to this extent have erupted in Iran? Do you know this is not the first time that the Iranian people have come this close to freeing themselves? In 2009, there were protests that looked exactly like this, called the Green Movement. In that moment, President Obama had an opportunity to intervene. He didn't. He chose instead to make $100 billion deal with the regime. What followed from that failed diplomacy we've all seen.
The deal that she mentioned is actually a nuclear deal that the United States made with Iran. It is called JCPOA. You can look it up on the internet. It's basically financial benefits for the authoritarian regime in exchange for an agreement on nuclear control. So basically, the United States believed that if you dangle enough money in front of these dictators, they would fall in line. The United States under the Obama administration believed that if they lifted the sanctions against Iran back then, Iran would behave in good faith and agreed to limit its nuclear program. And we all know that's not what happened afterward. Iran is actually producing an amount of nuclear weapons beyond the international standard. I talked about this in May last year. That's kind of why there was a conflict between Iran and the US. A lot of critics say this deal did not really liberalize Iran at all, nor did it deter their ability to develop nuclear weapons. If you're a longtime China watcher, this ought to sound familiar to you because the same thing happened to China. Remember in 1989, after the Chinese government killed students on the street, just like the Iranian government is doing right now. 10 years after what happened in Tiananmen Square, the United States embraced, actually they championed, they advocated for China's application for the WTO.
If China joins the WTO, but we turn our backs on them, it will confirm their fears.
And that's the start of the rise of modern China. That's how China got rich in a way. And the US president then, Bill Clinton, who went on a tour of speeches after speeches about how it was the right decision to make and China would eventually liberalize itself if we give them money. It's the same mindset, and it does not work.
Because they know getting into a rules-based system and promoting economic competition will both enhance the march of liberty and law and human rights. The other point I would like to make is there is a serious national security issue here. We do not know what China will choose to do in the future, and China will make that decision for itself. But we know that one decision will dramatically increase the chances of a constructive relationship with China in a stable Asia, and the other will dramatically increase the chances of a less happy outcome.
Again, here is the naivety comes at play. Bill Clinton, and by the way, this whole speech is to persuade people to allow China to join the WTO. And he's saying, if we play nice, if we welcome them with arms open, they will unlikely to be aggressive on a global stage. Imagine if Taiwan believed that, if Taiwan just embraced the foreign interference and played nice. And then the Taiwanese president is telling them, we gotta play nice with China. That is how we can gain long-term peace. It's very far-fetched. I'm not gonna lie. I can't believe Bill Clinton believed that the way to deter China is to do business with them.
That's why Japan and North Korea, Thailand and the Philippines, our democratic allies in Northeast Asia, are for this. If you want to reduce tensions along the Taiwan Strait,
Here we come.
if you want a more stable Asia, if you want to maximize the chances of avoiding proliferation of dangerous weapons and a new arms race, a yes is the right vote.
Well, what do we know? Fast forward, we're now in 2026, 26 years after Bill Clinton made that speech and after the United States allowed China to join the WTO. We're in an unprecedented geopolitical shithole because of that decision. And China did not back down. It's not more peaceful. In fact, a lot of people predict that there will be a war between China and Taiwan in 2027. Well, I guess around and find out.
That's why Martin Lee came all the way from Hong Kong. That's why people who have been themselves oppressed in China have pleaded with us to support this.
Just a little backstory on this. So this happened in the 2000s. I think Martin Lee is on paper a pro-democracy activist from Hong Kong, but there's really no guarantee like who they were influenced by. This sounds a little wild, but it's actually very well documented. They've managed to infiltrate and influence American elites from a very, very early time. Older than me, the spy agency started operating in this circle, the specific political elite circle, before I was born. And they're pretty successful. They reached these high society people, I guess, in the States through celebrities, artists, people you just wouldn't think of them as spies. They managed to control those Chinese artists and scholars and Manchu prince at some point, it's true. People managed to, or the Chinese Communist Party managed to control them and use them as a tool, literally as a tool to infiltrate the high society in the US. I honestly can't believe that people believed it would work. People believed that if you gave these dictators money, that they would change. It's a very bizarre concept. I don't know why people would think like that, but you're probably more familiar with these kind of thinking in the West because I was not born here, so maybe you have an answer for me. Let me know.
Mass murder, proxies across the Middle East, October 7th, and the iron boot on the necks of the Iranian people. Here's what he had to say after the fact.
I think back to 2009, you guys will recall, there was a big debate inside the White House about whether I should publicly affirm what was going on with the Green Movement, because a lot of the activists were being accused of being tools of the West if I supported what they were doing. And in retrospect, I think that was a mistake. Every time we see a flash, a glimmer of hope, of people longing for freedom, I think we have to express some solidarity about it.
I do give prompts to Obama for acknowledging his own mistake. It's something that he mentioned in that short clip really piqued my interest, I guess. He said a lot of people were accused of being a tool for the West, and that's kind of like, he alluded to the fact that that kind of influenced his decision. That narrative is extremely, again, very familiar because growing up, my country always told me that the West is evil. Even right now in Iran, the Iranian government, the official storyline, I guess, is that these protests are made violent by external forces, by the United States. They are the culprit here, as if people weren't angry in the first place, like the United States made them angry. That's why they took it to the street, to oppose your government. which is ridiculous, right? But I think there's something about human psychology that really make this type of argument work. Growing up, I was always taught, mind your own business. Do not interfere with other people's business. That's kind of like not just even political, it's a lifelong philosophy because I was brought up this way. I don't know if you guys know this, but a few years ago, I guess 20 years ago now, God, am I that old? Anyways, there was an old lady who was hurt on the street and nobody wanted to help her because one of the arguments is, why do you bother helping her? That's her own business. The idea that if you show compassion, if you reach out and help someone, that is interfering with other people's business. And that's why you hear the word sovereignty used multiple times by Chinese officials when they're trying to defend themselves. When they're criticized on their human rights issues, sovereignty.
对干涉别国内政，一贯主张各国的主权和安全。
It's just very confusing. I can see how people might fall for that. And it really comes down to what is more moral? It is more moral to be a cold bystander and watch atrocities happen? Or is it more moral to help when you know your help is needed? I think that's an easy question.
This is not the first moment of its kind, but it must be the last. We cannot repeat the mistakes of the past. That is what the past is there for. So I say to the President of the United States, do not look back and say shoulda, woulda, coulda. The time to correct the mistakes of the past is now. The people of Iran are carrying regional liberation on their backs, and it is our moral imperative to stand firmly behind them. Do not let this tiny sliver in time that promises monumental transformation pass us by. I'm not just asking you to not let down the people of Iran. I'm telling you to not let down this sliding doors moment in history, because once it's gone, it's gone.